This is the third video in a three-part series about car buying in 2023. To help me, I had a prior car salesman come in and discuss the car market as well as best car buying practices. In part one, we looked at how the shift in the car market will affect your next purchase. In part two, we looked at practical strategies for how you can purchase a car this year. And in part three, we finish up with the best tips for buying your next car. Let's get into it. We kind of talked a little bit about new versus used. What's, like, if you're going for used, what's traditionally understood as the best age to purchase a used vehicle?
Wow. You're probably going to get your best deal on a 5 to 7 year old vehicle.
Okay.
You can still get older vehicles than that, and you can get newer vehicles than that, but that 5 to 7 is typically probably going to be the sweet spot on dollars. So
yeah, in terms of the amount of value that it's already lost, you know, versus the amount of mileage that you have.
Another one that if I'm going to buy a used car, and I've bought a few of them here recently, we had an accident and we had to replace the car, but look at a car that's around 3 years old, 36,000 miles on it. If you want a car that's still really new and probably fairly well taken care of, it's a car that's about 2.5 to 3 years old and about 30 to 40,000 miles, because chances are it was a lease car. And a person who's turning in their lease at the end of their lease and probably just rolling into a brand new car, they probably took decent care of it, because a lot of these lease programs will have a free oil change or two attached to it that you take back to the dealership.
Yeah.
In the
also,
dealership,
they don't want to get fined.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you'll get dinged if you lease, like a quarter-size dent, and if a tire tread below a certain thing. They a lot of times will certify those things. I don't necessarily, I don't ever pay for a certification on a vehicle. That's the other thing. Like when I'm buying a used car, certification extends the warranty. It runs it through a more rigorous process. But if you're within the window, like if you're less than 5 years, less than 60,000 miles typically, chances are, if you look at it closely enough, it's already gone through their service department.
Yeah.
And if it looks good and if it sounds good and runs good, and take it to your mechanic, by all means. If they all think it looks good, chances are it could have been certified, and you just saved yourself like $1,500 on the certification.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So,
all right, so one of the things that we had talked about in the last video was, you know, if someone doesn't want to deal with the whole negotiation aspect, because, like, I personally, I felt comfortable in the communication and everything, but I haven't done a whole lot of negotiation or anything. This was the first vehicle that we have ever purchased, because, like, the two vehicles that we were driving, both of which were very high mileage. Like, my car is currently at 221,000 miles. Bailey's car, right before it died, was at 193,000 miles. So, like, they were both family vehicles that just kind of turned into our vehicles when we graduated and moved out and stuff. So, great blessing on our parts in terms of being able to, you know, our families being able to give us these vehicles and stuff. Very nice. I haven't done, like, any negotiation like that before. So looking at Carvana and CarMax and some of the others is actually pretty...
It can be an appealing option.
It can be very appealing, because then you don't have to... you just don't have to deal with that. So anyways, all that to say, Carvana has had a lot of stuff happen in the last year. And I know that in the last video you had mentioned, like, honestly, I just wouldn't deal with Carvana because they've had some issues and stuff. I started following it a little bit more closely, and wow, have they had some issues. I mean, they've been banned in several states, Michigan, Illinois, and a number of other states. I think even Ohio is looking at banning them.
Yeah, they had some titling issues.
Yeah.
And it got them in a lot of trouble. I think Florida was one of the first places they had an issue. I don't know if they're banned down there, but they were selling cars that they didn't have titles to.
Yeah.
And that's illegal.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that.
Yeah, and you hear stories about people that find out that their vehicle was stolen and they purchased it from Carvana. So they purchased a stolen vehicle from Carvana.
Yeah.
And then their vehicle is you know, repossessed by the sheriff's office. And now they're out of vehicle.
And the money.
And the money.
Because you're not going
and
to
they
get the
don't have
money
a
back.
title.
You're not going to get the money back right away.
Yeah.
You might get the money back from Carvana eventually, but if the company dissolves, then you have nothing, right? Yeah. Carvana is one of those ones that it became kind of like the top dog really fast. And anytime a company becomes the top dog overnight, it should raise a couple of just your spidey senses should go off just a little bit. I'm not against small businesses becoming big businesses. It's just the rapid rate at which they just increased was just astronomical.
Yeah.
And do your research, right? Like look at what people are saying about them. I don't buy anything from anywhere that I'm not familiar with without looking at reviews first.
Yeah.
Everything I buy, I read reviews on, and so other customers are going to give you some of those like warning signs. Like they have a yellow card already.
Yeah.
So there's others that are similar to it that are smaller, more regional based. I'd probably go there. CarMax has a good thing. CarMax really has their lane, and they're not trying to gimmick it too much. The deliver the car to your door from Carvana is cool. CarMax does make you come to the dealership, and yet it removes the haggling. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. I know that dealership's going to come across as scary, and you don't want to do the negotiating thing, and I totally get that because a lot of car dealerships over time have come across as real sleazy. I get that. However, there's something to be said for actually looking at a vehicle on a lot before it hits your driveway.
Yeah. Even if they have that 7-day, no questions asked return.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have a really hard time buying a vehicle from something like that. Not against it. I just wouldn't feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
I would sell my car to them in a heartbeat. If they're going to offer me more than anybody else, I'll sell it to them right now.
Yeah, they were providing like significantly more money than a lot of other a lot of other dealerships and companies.
Absolutely. I mean, I will regularly, and this is kind of a weird thing about me, I'll regularly take and I'll run my VIN number on my truck through. I love my truck. I don't want to get rid of my truck. But if somebody gives me the right dollar amount, I'll send that thing out the driveway today.
Yeah.
But, I'll regularly run it through CarMax, Carvana, Vroom, Car Gurus, and see if anybody else is out there. Car Gurus is kind of a cool one, though, because what that does is that looks at your local dealerships. And so it's kind of regional. So you're still working with local dealerships. You can buy from Car Gurus as well, and they'll deliver it to you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that Carvana, CarMax deal, but you're also getting it from a dealership. So if you want that brick and mortar that you're tied to, CarMax and Car Gurus could be your thing.
Yeah. Also, they're great for research. I did probably the majority of my research from Car Gurus, like following different vehicles and different vehicle types, which was helpful. But something that was interesting that you were talking about was the rapid growth of Carvana. And earlier I looked at the numbers. Super interesting. I don't have a graph, but the numbers are insane. Right now, the stock price of Carvana is $6.88.
Wow.
A year ago, it was almost 10x that at $60 and something cents.
Yeah.
And it had hit a max of $370 per share in August of 2021. Obviously, that was like right when the car market was really getting super hot. But that is insane how much it's dropped in that amount of time, even just in the last year.
And so it spiked about as fast as it dropped. So maybe not quite that fast because that drop's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But see that number drop is indicative that there's a major problem with the company.
Yep.
Because shareholders are starting to see that there's a problem with the company. Anytime states ban a company, you should probably be like, woo, like your siren should go off. It should be a really big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, the increase and decrease in stock prices shows you that company has risen and fallen faster than it takes most companies to rise.
Yep. Quick interruption. If you're finding value in this, then hit the like button below because this guy would really appreciate it. So is there anything else that you want to share anything else that would be beneficial for the viewers. Obviously, this is a personal finance channel. We're trying to save money, trying to be responsible with money. If there's anything else that you would like to share from a prior...
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing for me is know what you can afford before you go in. I mean, there is absolutely no sense losing your tail on a car. It's one of the fastest depreciating assets that's out there, if it's not the fastest depreciating asset out there, which makes it not an asset anymore. It's a liability.
Yeah.
If it depreciates fast enough that it's no longer an asset. That's really what happens. Especially if you drive a new car.
Yeah.
For the first couple of years, you're driving a liability.
Yeah, you can lose your butt on some of those deals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's so difficult to not, like, even for someone like me who's been researching for months and is very aware of what I want to pay. I use I. It's we.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I'm very aware of what we want to pay, and I'm conscious that there's that issue of, like, oh, you get into it and you get to test drive it, and it's a lot easier to bump that budget up a little bit higher. You know, even with houses, it was like when you walk into a house, you start imagining your life in this house, and you're like, we can probably raise the budget a little bit. And that's what'll get you in trouble. That's what'll get you that average $700 per month car payment that we're looking at in America right now.
So the interesting thing there is, it's easy to bump the overall cost of the car if I just simply turn it into a car payment.
And that's where you want to look at out the door. What is the out the door price? Not the payment price.
Absolutely. Like, because if I look at it and I go, okay, well, so what's $100 over the course of a 5, 6, 7, 8 year car loan? Which, by the way, 8-year car loans?
Yeah, insane.
Good golly, no, sorry, ain't gonna happen. Anyway, but like that's how a lot of times a dealership will get you. It's only gonna be an extra $10 a month. Well, yeah, but that's $10 a month. That's 12 months in a year. That's 8 years of my loan or whatever it ends up. That's a lot of money.
96 months of $10 a month is a lot of cash.
I mean, you just added $1,000, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's not considering the extra interest that you're paying.
Correct.
Yeah. So, okay. So one last thing. To remain consistent with the channel, you know, I'm encouraging people to actually save up ahead of time and purchase in cash.
Sure, yeah.
What would be your suggestions going into 2023, or, you know, we're in 2023 right now, to purchase a car in cash well?
It's going to cost you more than it has in previous years. So just be aware of that. Understand that you have to understand whether you have champagne taste on a wine cooler budget, and you got to be okay with wine coolers.
Yep.
And so, if you're going to buy a car well with cash, you're going to want to make sure that you have the right parameters of the car you want to get. What do you need versus what do you want, and understand that you can give up some wants in order to get the needs.
Yeah, and I mean that's what we had to do because. We purchased our truck in cash, which I'm very, very proud of, and I want to remain consistent with everything that I've talked about here on the channel, obviously. But we had to give up some wants, like lower mileage.
Yeah.
Now, my favorite joke as of late, and it's since become irrelevant because Bailey's car died, was we purchased a truck with 123,000 miles on it, and it lowered the average mileage of our vehicles down to 177,000 miles. Hilarious until Bailey's car died. But, you know.
Yeah. Oh, man.
But, you know, we had to give up the lower mileage that we wanted in order to stay within the price range. And the goal has never been to get a truck that we'd be driving 100 miles a day, because that's what I used to do for my last job. But like now, it's being driven 8 to 10 miles a day. That's not that bad. We can deal with that.
Sure.
The gas prices aren't that bad for when you're driving that little. I mean, I filled up one time in April.
See,
I'll take that.
I did just the reverse. Like, I started out driving 5 miles each way,
Yeah.
to 5 minutes, 3 miles each way to work.
And then you moved.
And then I moved, and now I'm driving, 50 miles a day.
Yeah.
And I'm driving a truck. And it's like, okay, time out. So you're going to soon see me driving a car.
Yeah.
The truck will stick around. I'm not sure if it's going to be this truck or a different one. But, yeah, you understand that too. Like, if you're buying a vehicle, what do you really need? We had this conversation with my son when he was buying a vehicle. He wanted a sports car. He wanted this, that, and the other thing. Well, we live in an area where they don't plow the roads in the wintertime. And there's a lot of gravel up there. Do you really want a car that only sits 1.5 inches off the ground?
Yeah.
Or do you want a truck? He ended up with a truck, which is probably a really smart decision because, well, he drove a Civic and he couldn't get down the road one day. And so understand that too. If you're going to buy a car with, especially if you're buying it with cash, you're throwing a large amount of money out, and you want to make sure you get the right thing.
Yep.
So do your research, really kind of whittle it down to here's the things I really need in a vehicle, and be willing to give up some of the wants in order to get the real needs.
Yeah. And be willing to walk away.
Absolutely. Be willing to walk away.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we will come back for, I'm sure, another car market update at some point.
I'm sure the market's going to continue to do this, and as long as it does this, and I love vehicles, I'll be glad to come back.
So which vehicle do you have your eyes on right now? If you haven't seen part 1 yet, you can watch that right here. If you haven't seen part 2, you can watch that right here. And if you want to see Derrick react to my very first car deal ever, you can watch this next. And of course, you can subscribe if you want to see more personal finance content.